Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week's opening question comes from Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony, who says, Yo, Steve, I'll make this short, sweet, and right to the point. Out of all of the 5 I've mentioned right here, which one of these do you think is much worse, and why? The show 19 Kids and Counting? Corn, the vegetable, not the band? Kirk Cameron? Fear of Spiders? Or that annoying piece of 4-year-old ass fudge called Caillou? P.S. For a little bonus question, do you prefer Berenstain Bears with an A or Berenstein Bears with an E? Just figured I'd ask that since I've seen that new Angry Video Game Nerd episode where he starts ripping off the games based on that franchise. If you haven't seen it, take a look. It's one of the best webisodes there ever is on that. Of the 5 things you mentioned there, I would say 19 Kids and Counting is by far the worst because I don't think that's the sort of behavior we should be modeling and celebrating as a culture. I mean, I think if you want to start a family and have kids, that's great. You should be able to do that, and that's wonderful. But can you stop at 2 or 3? Do you really need to be having 19 plus kids? Are your genes really that great that you need to flood the human gene pool with your offspring? Not something that we should be praising, I don't think. So that would be my pick for the worst of those 5 things you mentioned. And I have to disagree with you about the Video Game Nerds Berenstain Bears episode. I'm not like a huge fan of the Angry Video Game Nerd, but I have watched it from time to time over the years and enjoyed some of the episodes, and I didn't think this one was all that great. I thought the jokes were okay, like the stuff when he was riffing on the video games was fine, but the plot, the story about the parallel universes and Berenstain versus Berenstein, I mean, I thought it was a nice idea to try to incorporate that sort of conspiracy theory about Berenstain versus Berenstein, but I just didn't think he pulled it off very well. I just don't think it was a very well written episode, and I have now critiqued the writing of an episode of The Angry Video Game Nerd. I think this is the time where I should be calling my sponsor. I think I've hit rock bottom here. But instead of doing that, I'm going to keep answering questions from you folks. Next up is a question from Sabrina Loizides Meredith, who says, are there any old films that once you saw them on the big screen, you appreciated more? Are there any that you hated once you saw them in a theater because you could see the shoddy effects or painted backgrounds? That's a good question. I can't recall ever seeing a film that I liked before and then not liking it after I saw it on the big screen. I'm not that judgmental about shoddy backgrounds or bad special effects or anything like that. As long as the movie is gripping or is entertaining or diverting, I'm willing to overlook bad special effects or shoddy backgrounds or anything like that. That sort of thing doesn't bother me if the rest of the movie is good. But yeah, a movie that Jason and I gave a pretty bad review to on an episode of Late Seating a while back, Gone with the Wind. I actually think if you're going to watch Gone with the Wind, you should see it in a movie theater and you should watch it on a big screen. That to me is the only way to watch that movie and really enjoy it, because it is a spectacle, especially the burning of Atlanta sequence. There are some really striking shots there, and it is a sweeping historical epic that is really meant to be seen on the big screen. So if you want to watch that movie and really get something out of it, I think you have to watch it in a theater on a big screen, because watching it on TV, as you can tell when you listen to that episode of the Late Seating podcast, it's not that great of a movie. Conference Report. The episode of Luke Cage that gave Luke's origin story also featured the story of how Cottonmouth came to be the kind of criminal he was, presenting his villainy as an inevitable or at least understandable product of childhood abuse, etc. This is the first time I've seen this kind of attempt to present criminals as more than simply evil in shows that have a superhero element. Can you think of others that do this? Well, the obvious example, again, in the Marvel Netflix family would be the first season of Daredevil, where I feel the character of Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, was an even better example than Cottonmouth of a truly three-dimensional, fully realized human villain character. I think Vincent D'Onofrio's performance as Wilson Fisk in that first season of Daredevil just made that series. I mean, it would have been good anyway because it was just so well executed and just a really well told, well photographed series, but the way it handled its villains, particularly Fisk, really made that first season of Daredevil shine. And as much as I enjoyed the second season of Daredevil, I think it was missing that Fisk character, or a character similar to that was a bad guy but also was a fully realized person. Also, I think, again, sort of sticking with Marvel, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did a pretty good job in the previous couple of seasons of presenting the character of Grant Ward like that, where Ward began as a heroic character and then was revealed to actually be a villainous character, and was developed over several seasons into a pretty complex guy, where he wasn't just an evil person who did bad things because he was bad. He actually had a history and motivations that made his actions understandable, although not condonable. So I would throw that one in as well, as far as a superhero TV series that gave its villain, or one of its villains, a motivation beyond, oh, he's just the baddie. He's the baddie and the good guys have to stop him. The man they call Jane. Hey, Steve, do you have any advice for someone who wants to be a writer for television or film? The college I'm going to doesn't offer any courses that are relevant to that goal, but it's something I'd love to learn more about. Is there anything outside a university setting that you think could help someone wanting to pursue that line of work? I can give you advice in terms of writing and learning and honing your craft, but I can't really advise you on how to go about actually having a career. I mean, obviously, the number one thing you would need to have a career where you're actually working as a writer in film or television and selling scripts and making a living would be to have an agent, to have connections with somebody, have connections with a production company or with a studio, so people know who you are, so you have someone who is willing to read your scripts or read your proposals and give you a fair shot at making a sale, at selling a story, or being able to get a job writing for something. I have no idea how to go about doing that. I imagine it would be far more difficult to do if you started out without the university setting, without being part of a major sort of credible writing program at a school that is known for doing that and is able to sort of help students get their foot in the door after graduation. I mean, that's one of the major advantages of going to a university that has a well-respected, well-known writing program. It's not just the education, and it's not just the degree. It's nice to have the degree, but the really important part and the biggest advantage is that you make connections that can help you as you then move into the job market. And as I say, I can't really tell you how to do that because I haven't done that and I wouldn't know where to start. But as far as actually writing, if you don't have writing classes or specific screenwriting classes at the school you're going to, take as many writing classes as you can, whether they're screenwriting classes or film or television writing classes or not. Take classes in creative writing and just practice writing and get used to writing different things and get used to the experience of having other people read and critique your work. Because especially if you're going to write in TV, that's something you really need to be okay with and be able to work with. Being able to work within a group where you submit a script and then everybody adds their 2 cents and everybody's taking things away or putting their own stuff on top of it. And you need to be able to deal with that as a writer. And also, you should be reading as many screenplays as you possibly can. Screenplays are fairly easy to find now on the internet, and you should be reading as many as you possibly can. Teleplays, screenplays from films you like, screenplays from films and TV shows that you hate. If you watch a TV series, you watch a certain episode and you like a particular thing that was done, you think, oh, that was really nice. I love the way they did that. I wonder how they wrote that. How do you script for that? You try to find a copy of the screenplay and see how they did script for that. There's a lot of sort of on your own self-taught learning that you can do in terms of actually learning how to write scripts and learning how to get better at it. And that's important. And if you're not doing that already, and I apologize if I'm patronizing you if you're doing this kind of thing already. If you're not doing this kind of thing already, I would suggest doing that. But that's really the only advice I can give you because I don't know how to go about getting, an agent to be a screenwriter or to be a TV writer. I don't know how to tell you to go about that. I wish I did. If you figure it out, let me know. Kevin Logan, assuming that Hillary Clinton wins the presidential election, a fairly safe assumption in my view, what do you think will become of the Trump revolution? Do you see it fizzling out into nothing, or sticking around as a real force in mainstream American politics? Hopefully the alt-right will crawl back into the hole they came out of, but I have my doubts about that. Also, on a related note, is the Republican Party salvageable at this point, or is it doomed to succumb to the internal civil war that has been brewing for years? I think the Trump revolution will stick around for a while. I think the people in that group who felt spoken to and empowered by the Trump campaign will continue to be around and make noise for a few years, just like the Tea Party, which was sort of the precursor to the Trump movement. I think they'll still be around. I think if Trump starts his TV channel or his media empire, I think there'll probably be a reliable audience for that. And they'll probably drain some of the more extreme right-wing audience away from Fox News, at least for a while. We'll see if it actually has legs, but I think it'll probably be like that for a few years. And as for what will happen to the Republican Party, I mean, that'll be really interesting. I don't know. I would like to think that the Republican Party would take a lesson from this year and would realize that they can't win if all they do is appeal to the angry white cisgender male voter. That if they aim their campaign squarely at that demographic and they pander to the bigotry and intolerance and ignorance of the worst political people in our culture, and they alienate everybody else. They alienate women, they alienate people of color, they alienate LGBTQ folks, they alienate immigrants and children of immigrants, that they just can't win elections, at least not on a national level. If they take that lesson and they make some real changes, not just in the way they present their party, but in their policies and their proposals, then I think they could have a future as a major party in this country. If they don't, and they continue to put up people like Trump as their major nominees in presidential elections, then I think they're just going to keep slipping. I mean, I don't think they're going to go away right away, and it'll be interesting to see what the midterm elections are like in 2 years, to see if the Republicans gain back some of their predicted losses this year, or if they continue to just drop down further and further. They need to come up with an identity that is about something other than appealing to cis hetero white men while vilifying and demonizing everyone else, and just being the party of no, being the party of keeping the Democrats from doing what they want to do, because that's been the Republican identity for the last 8 years. We're for the white cis het men and no to everything the Democrats want to do. No. That's been the Republican identity, and it has not worked for them on a national level. It works in certain states and in certain jurisdictions, but it doesn't work on a national level anymore. And if they want to continue to be a powerful, influential political party for the long term, not just in the next election, but the next 5 or 10 elections, they're going to have to change. And I don't know if they can. I don't know if they want to. I don't know if, honestly, after all this Trump stuff, I still don't know if they realize that they need to change. I don't know if they even realize what the problem is, to be honest. Radical Bacon. I have a friend who cheats on all his significant others. I've tried to convince him that this way lies drama and worse, but he still does it. Mostly I just ignore it, but do I have any social obligation to warn people off him? I don't know if I would say you have an obligation to warn people, but I don't think there would be any problem with that. I don't think it's your job to make sure that people he dates know that he's a cheater. But if you did, I don't see anything wrong with that. If he has an established pattern of behavior and you have brought these concerns up to him in the past and he has continued to be a serial cheater, then I don't see any problem with you, taking one of his dates or one of his partners aside and saying, hey, I wish you all the best, but hey, watch your back. Keep an eye on him, because, I don't see how there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think it's your job. Like, if you would rather just keep ignoring it and not worry about it and say, that's his deal and he's responsible for that, I think you're perfectly fine doing that. But if you do decide to sort of, say, hey, come over here for a second. Let me tell you something about him. Just so you know. I don't see that there's anything wrong with that. It's not something you have to do, but it's something you could do. Rotting in the Midwest. Steve, you recently posted a 5 things video on the subject of universal horror films. At first glance, I interpreted the title as if it referred to universal horror, the things in life that scare all of us. Do you think there are things that all people fear? I know some people don't appear to be afraid of death, and I am not bothered by visiting the dentist. If we permit exceptions, what things might we consider to be universal horrors? What do you fear most? And while we are on the subject, what's your favorite horror film? Favorite horror film is tough. It's actually way more difficult to choose my favorite horror film than it is to choose my favorite film overall. Because Sherlock Jr. has been my favorite film overall for many, many years, and there's never, since that became my favorite film, there hasn't been a contender to sort of knock it off. But there are so many horror films that I just adore for different reasons. I love George Romero's zombie movies. I love classic universal horror, as you could tell by that 5 things video you referenced. I mean, I love The Invisible Man. I love Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. I love the Hammer series. I love Horror of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein and that whole Frankenstein series. Frankenstein Created Woman, that's just an amazing movie. I don't know. What would be my favorite horror movie? Maybe Murnau's Nosferatu? But I could pick Ask Me Tomorrow, and I could pick something else. It's really tough. As for universal horrors, yeah, I mean, I think universal, depending on how literally you take that term, I guess there could be no such thing as universal horrors because, as you say, there could always be exceptions. I mean, I would say death. I think death and the fear of death, the fear of annihilation, is the motivating factor behind all kinds of things that humans do, good and bad. I mean, I think it's one of the driving forces behind religion. I think religion comes from our fear of death and our deep-seated need to believe that we can escape death or that death is not the end. I mean, I think that is the root factor of all religion, whether it's positive or negative. The beautiful, peaceful religions and the religions that tell us to kill each other and go to war. I mean, I think fear of death is underlying all of that. And I think fear of death is also what motivates us to start families and to have children. I mean, I think fear of death is as close to a universal horror as I can think of. But sure, there are people who don't fear it or who say they don't fear it, and I'll just take them at their word. But that's as close as I can think of. I mean, what more existential horror could there be than the fear of no longer existing, the fear of death, and the fear of death knowing that death is coming, knowing that you can't escape it, knowing that you will face it eventually, that there will come a moment where you are not here anymore, where your life will be over, where your consciousness will cease to exist, and having that as a certainty, having that as the one thing that you know is waiting for you in the future. I can't imagine anything more horrible and dreadful than that knowledge. But some people don't see it that way. So I guess you can't call it a universal horror. But to me, that's about as close as you can get to something like that. Because even though I suppose there are some people who don't feel that fear, it's pretty common. It's damn near universal, that feeling that, the end is coming and there's nothing you can do about it. And no matter what you're doing now, no matter how good of a time you're having, no matter how much you make a good use of the time you have, that time is always running out. And one day, we will all hear the goofy sound effect that signals the end of our round. And the sad thing is, after that, we don't get
the lightning round.
But you get one here. So I hope that makes up for the fact that we're all going to die. Der Wunderbar Bar, have you done a Let Me Listen on any of the 8 Universal Classic Monster Classics? Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman, Phantom of the Opera, Creature of the Black Lagoon? We have done late seating reviews of Dracula and of Frankenstein. We have not done any of the others. I have reviewed some of the others on this channel on my monster movie review series, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but we've only done Drac and Frank so far on late seating. Deadhead Animation, Clinton is a 7. She's been proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries, is partially responsible for the war in Iraq, and wants to start a war with Russia. How can you justify a 7? Well, because the first one is not true. She was not proven to be behind election fraud in the primaries. I cannot find a single credible source that says that or that makes that case. That is hyperbole at best and just flat out false at worst. She is partially responsible for the war in Iraq in the sense that she voted for it when she was in the Senate. She now says that she regrets that vote, that she would not vote that way if given the chance today. She thinks the Iraq war was a bad idea, so I give her credit for that, for realizing she made a mistake and changing her mind. And I don't think she wants to start a war with Russia. Again, I think that is taking an incredibly uncharitable and quite biased view of Clinton's views. I don't think she would start a war with Russia, and I don't think that if she had the chance to avoid a war with Russia, that she would take an action that would start a war with Russia. And hopefully she doesn't start a war with Russia, or Russia doesn't start a war with us, because that would suck. Ohoyerno, why is sexual consent such an issue? It's not like it's complicated. Yeah, it's not complicated, but I think the problem is that a lot of men feel like our desire to have sex with a woman should override her desire to not have sex with us. I think it's entitlement and selfishness and the assumption of male privilege and male supremacy. I think that's it. I mean, that's not the way it should be, but sadly that is the way it often is. Corey Donaldson, hi Steve, here's my question for next Fridays you had to ask. What are your favorite haunted house / ghost story films? I mean, I guess I have to say The Shining. You know, The Shining is way up there. What's another good one? House on Haunted Hill, classic. The Sixth Sense is not bad, if you want to know the truth. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan's reputation has come down in the last several years with some of his recent films, but Sixth Sense is smashing, you know, so I would put that up there too. Joshua Purvis, hi Steve, my question is, what are some of your favorite zombie movies? Thanks. I mentioned it earlier, I'm kind of a purist when it comes to zombie movies, so I love the George Romero zombie movies, especially the first two, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Day of the Dead is good too, but Night and Dawn are my favorites. And I also love 28 Days Later. 28 Days Later is just a magnificent film to me, and one of the great sort of modern horror films of the last 15-20 years. I would say 28 Days Later is right at the top of my list. And also Return of the Living Dead is a really, really great horror comedy and a great zombie movie. Brian Gibson, why would anyone make a movie titled Nightcrawler that's not about Kurt Wagner? Because they want to fuck with Fox and make it more difficult for them to make one of those X-Men spin-offs starring Nightcrawler, I guess. Will Vexus, if Cumberbatch's Sherlock and Jean-Luc Picard had a baby, what would that child be like? Perfect. Carlisle the Cinephile, let's keep this team building game going, but this time let's go to villains. If you were building a cross-dimensional 7-member team of supervillains, who would be on that team? Oh, God. Well, okay. Galactus, Thanos, Darkseid, that's 3. Dr. Doom, Lex Luthor, Dr. Sivana, Shazam represent, and who would be the last one? I don't know. Bizarro. Fuck it. Bizarro's got to be in there too. Let's have fun watching them try to get along and agree on a plan. Gregory Everson, do I have to cut off my balls to become a feminist? No, Gregory, you do have to take your head out of your ass. And it would probably also help if you got over your fear of women. Old Comic 1, how many angels can fit in a bottle of whiskey? You may want to consult Jack McPherson on this one. I actually did talk to Jack about this before I started shooting. And according to Jack, the more you drink from the bottle, the more angels you find in there. It's weird, kind of how that works. Crowbro, will the Blue Jays make the World Series next year? Oh, fuck it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the Blue Jays will make the series next year. If that makes you happy. Sure. Yeah. They'll play the Orioles in the ALCS, and they'll win in a thrill-packed Game 7 that goes into extra innings. Sure. That'll happen. Mark my words. Hey, that's the end of the lightning round. That's it for the questions. It's time for the shout-out of the weekend. The shout-out this week goes to ContraPoints. ContraPoints has had a YouTube channel for a little while, but man, ContraPoints has been absolutely killing it the last few weeks, the last month or so. This channel has been producing some awesome videos. The most recent video is a video that ContraPoints made about pickup artist culture that was just great. It just came out just this week. There are also a series of recent videos on non-binary genders, on critiquing some of the prominent, loud, obnoxious YouTube anti-feminists. Just an awesome channel. ContraPoints is a great, interesting, unique voice in our community and has created a really awesome YouTube channel. So check out ContraPoints, especially that pickup artist video that just came out recently. Really good. Highly recommended. That's the shout out. ContraPoints. You won't be sorry, or maybe you will if your taste is not like mine. But I'm just telling you what I think. So you can't blame me if you don't like it, just because I like it. You're entitled not to like it. I mean, you suck if you don't like it, because it's good. Anyway, speaking of things that are good, how about those Let Me Listen podcasts? There are a whole bunch of Let Me Listen podcasts that are the brain children of the great Jason Harding, my good buddy Jason with a D, the puppet master of Opinionville, which is also a YouTube channel that you should be watching. There are a whole bunch of Let Me Listen podcasts. There is Let Me Finish, which is the original that is hosted by Jason and Finite Atticus. There's American Monsters and How to Destroy Them. There's Filmtastic Voyage, hosted by Mike and Alex. There is Cinetific, hosted by Professor Jason and Professor Aaron, and there is also Late Seating, which I save for last because it's the one that I'm on. And that is a show where Jason and I review classic films, and then we decide whether those films live up to their reputations, whether that reputation is as a great movie or as a notoriously bad movie. And to continue our little mini Halloween celebration, our new episode goes up today, and it is about the classic horror film Nightmare on Elm Street, the horror film that created Freddy Krueger, that introduced Freddy Krueger to the world and sort of energized and reinvented the slasher genre. Check out our episode where we review Nightmare on Elm Street and decide whether or not it lives up to its reputation. Is it a classic? Is it a little overrated? You'll have to listen to find out. You can listen to that episode of Late Seating, all of the past episodes of Late Seating, and all of the episodes of all of the amazing Let Me Listen podcasts by going to letmelistenpodcast.com. And again, as with the shout out, your mileage may vary, but I don't think you'll be sorry. That's it for me, everybody. I am out of here for another week. I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.